Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. Sorry it's been a while since my last video. I've been very busy getting ready for Pesach. I hope your Pesach preparations are going well. We're just literally days away now. And we are going to look at chapter 3 of Guard Your Tongue by Rabbi Zelig Pliskin based off the works of the Kovetz Chaim. I have a playlist now of all the little segments that we've gone through. We're so far up to page 43. And hopefully we'll get through the whole chapter today. There's some interesting topics. I've already had a flick through it and a bit of a quick revision. And the first one is backbiting. Backbiting. If you maliciously speak Loshon Hara about someone behind his back and do not want him to find out that you maligned him, in addition to violating the prohibition against speaking Loshon Hara, you also incur upon yourself a curse. That's true. According to Deuteronomy 27:24, where it says, "Cursed be the one who secretly smites his friend." So you've effectively compounded the felony here by not only speaking Loshon Hara, that is speaking in a way that has false motive, has bad motive, and there's really no grounds for you to speak about the particular subject except to run down the person and perhaps in effect make yourself look a little bit better in the process. You can speak negatively about somebody behind their back, but it has to have some form of constructive purpose. And also, if the person is a known apikorsim, that is a heretic, then it's permitted for you to speak about him as well, even ridicule him, but it isn't recommended because by engaging in that type of behavior, one begins to become quite effective in it, and it can cause him to be drawn to perhaps take on ridicule where in areas where it isn't necessary, and that can grow and become bigger and bigger. So it's advised against, but it is permissible. But anything that you say against anybody with wrong motive, that is to run them down behind their back in a way, particularly if you start a conversation by saying, "Don't ever tell him that I said this," or "If you tell him that I said this, I'll deny it," blah, 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 then you are going into some dangerous territory and you have to be very, very careful. Don't be a backbiter. Don't be somebody who goes around speaking behind other people's backs, trying to ruin a person's reputation covertly. I think they call it sniping. I think that's an expression in English where somebody in a very subtle way goes about trying to ruin a person's reputation to others. And then generally it's done, when it's effective, it's done very subtly, so that even if the person's words were relayed, they could sort of, depending on the inflection that they use, they could say, "I didn't mean anything by it, I didn't mean anything," something like that. So they've got themselves an out. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into spreading rumors and lies about other people that get churned over in a person's head, and a lot of times they're practicing. A lot of times we find ourselves meditating on iniquity and planning iniquity in our minds, and we barely recognize that we're doing it at times. We run through some dry runs and scenarios in our head. So as soon as we catch ourselves doing something like that, maybe we feel some sort of animosity towards somebody, maybe they genuinely did wrong us in some sort of a way, we have to do our best to try and divest ourselves of any type of bitterness or any type of anger or anything like that, or animosity that we have towards the person that may have legitimately wounded us in some way, because chances are we've wounded other people in similar ways, maybe even worse. And so we want to have an attitude where we want to relinquish any punishment coming upon them that is due, that is lawful, because we would want lawful punishment that is due upon us to also be overturned. And that won't happen unless you have an attitude like that toward other people. Sorry, I've expanded on that a fair bit, but I think it's important to mention some of those things. Number 2, Loshon Hara that the speaker would relate even in the presence of the subject. Now, I'm sure you've been in a situation where the person says it's not Loshon Hara because I would say it to the person to their face. I'm sure that's happened many times. I've even said that in my life probably quite a few times and heard it quite a few times. So let's see what we can find out here. If you feel that you would relate Loshon Hara, even if the subject were present, it is still forbidden. Even if you criticize the subject to his face, you are still forbidden to repeat the derogatory information to others. At least if you tell the person to their face, they might have respect for you that you're actually confronting them with the information. And if it's in private, even better. Now, they may not enjoy the experience, and you may not enjoy the experience, but at least you're showing them the respect and dignity by telling that to their face. It occurred to me once at a workplace where I actually perpetuated that type of thing in a workplace to two other employees, one of them being my supervisor, the other one a peer within the warehouse, and it didn't work. It didn't have any good effect, and I was really letting these guys have it too, because I felt that there was some things that needed to be said and the air needed to be cleared. It didn't have any positive effect. It subsequently led to me being called into the office and having to apologize. And I went, okay, that didn't work. Right, okay, fine. And actually, I think there was another employee present as well, listening to the subject, and some of it related to him as well. Now, would I do that again? I don't know, because, it did clear the air. It did take away some of the immediate tension. And I do, to this very day, stand by some of the things that I said, but I perhaps didn't have to go about it in the language that I used, maybe, in the way that I expressed it. That can sometimes happen. Sometimes when a person stands up for themselves, they may find that they stand up for themselves with so much fervor that they can go overboard. And even though they have legitimate grievance, now they've caused more issues because they've kind of drawn on weaponry that kind of exceeds what's needed to win the battle. And so it's overkill, and then it just goes into a complete mess. Even if you have criticized the subject to his face, you are still forbidden to repeat the derogatory information to others. I would tell Friedman that he is not a scholar, even if he were here, so it cannot be Loshon Hara. Wrong. This is considered Loshon Hara. Mrs. Diamond is a poor housewife, and her house is always a mess. I'd even say that if she was standing right here. Therefore, I'm allowed to say it wrong again. It's not Loshon Hara for me to say that Heshi is lazy, since I told him that to his face the other day. Still wrong. This is Loshon Hara. I'm so glad you're joining me for this video. I can't tell you enough how much of a value it has to not only yourself but myself, being able to merit somehow the ability to share such crucial teachings as these, which really have the ability to extend a person's life and the quality of a person's life. And so, the benefits that not only you're going to receive, but I can potentially receive, and others, if you share this video, can potentially receive, is literally boundless. So thank you so much for tuning in. Number 3, Loshon Hara stated in the presence of the subject. Speaking Loshon Hara about someone in his presence is very serious, even if the sole intention in mentioning his faults to criticize him constructively. That didn't make sense. I'll say that again. Speaking Loshon Hara about someone in his presence is very serious, even if the sole intention in mentioning his faults is to criticize him constructively. Corrective comments should be delivered privately. Some of you with a Christian background will mention the Matthew 18 process that often gets wheeled out. Offending someone publicly is Loshon Hara and constitutes a grave sin. You may also be guilty of causing him humiliation and mortification. So you can literally shame somebody so much that it's on the same level as actually killing them. They might go into depression, and the things that gave them such joy in life no longer gives them that joy, and they just become sort of like the Walking Dead. And so you can your comment and your whole diatribe, your whole spiel against that person publicly, especially if they're present and they become embarrassed in front of everybody, you can literally kill them And it could take them years to recover and to get out of that, if they recover at all. So you have to be very careful and think about all the situations over your life. Maybe it was somebody you thought was really deserving of it and it had it coming. But go back and analyze it, because there may be some things that you need to do tshuva for, and maybe even checking in on the person years later, if that's something that you think you need to do. Menachem, Coleman, and Shlomo were strolling along the avenue. Menachem asked Coleman, "Did you know that Shlomo doesn't come to daven on time?" Besides speaking Loshon Hara, Menachem is guilty of embarrassing Shlomo. If Menachem wants to admonish Shlomo, he should do so privately. So take him aside and say, "Listen, why don't you turn up to the morning prayers on time? Why are you always late? Is it possible that we could remedy the situation? Can I help you? Because it's a bad look on you and it's a bad look on the congregation." If we've got somebody who's a member who's turning up consistently late, it's a sign of disrespect. If you can turn up consistently late, you can turn up consistently early or on time. There's no excuse. There's no sort of excuse. I mean, if somebody was to tell you, "Listen, if you're the first to turn up, you get $1,000 cash," what do you think would happen? People would camp out the front of the shul if there was $1,000 cash going for the first person to turn up to daven in the morning. So you just go, "So what are we doing?" And then all of a sudden it puts everything in perspective, and we get shown and really taken aback about where we're really standing, which is not in a very good place. It's better than maybe most people, but it still can be a lot better. So if we had that attitude, there's $1,000 there or there's $10,000 there, how would we react? Would we have any trouble in getting out of bed if we knew we were going to get $10,000 if we got out at a certain time? And if you just get out immediately, then you've got a problem. You need to fix that. You need to go, "Okay, I've got to change my mindset." Many people were present at the party when Mrs. Hellier requested a favor from Mrs. Feldman. "Sorry, I'm too busy now," refused Mrs. Feldman. "This isn't the first time I've noticed your lack of chesed kindness," Mrs. Hellier said loudly so the others could hear. "Why don't you think about anyone besides yourself?" Mrs. Hellier is guilty of speaking Loshon Hara. Number 4, statements that are permissible because the speaker is willing to make them in the presence of the subject. Certain statements are not considered Loshon Hara if the speaker would be willing to make them even in the presence of the person spoken about. This refers to ambiguous statements that could be construed either as entirely harmless or as slightly derogatory. The interpretation of the statement depends on the tone of the voice and the gestures of the speaker. If the subject is present, the speaker will be ashamed to speak in a manner which implies a derogatory meaning. The willingness to let the subject hear the statement shows that the remark is definitely not to be construed as derogatory. However, if the statement is clearly derogatory, even if only slightly so, it is always forbidden whether or not the subject is present. Reuven, a stranger in town, bumped into Shimon and Levi. He asked them, "Could you please give me directions to a kosher restaurant?" "Why go to a kosher restaurant?" Shimon replied. "Levi always has an abundance of food in his home." This can be meant as an insult. Levi overindulges in eating, but it can also be highly complimentary. So it depends. It says, "Why go to a restaurant?" Levi has always an abundance of food in his home. So it could be a positive, it could be a negative. Depends what the tone is, and depends the speed of the delivery of it. Because he could be implying that Levi's, a little bit of a glutton, as it goes on to say here. This can be meant as an insult. Levi overindulging in eating. But it can also be highly complimentary. Levi is very hospitable and always has a very large supply of food for the guests. Since it is said in Levi's presence, Shimon surely means it as a compliment. Even if Levi was not there, but Shimon felt that it would have made the statement in his presence, the statement is permissible since it definitely was not meant to be derogatory. But if Shimon had tried to convey the impression that Levi is a voracious eater, the statement would be forbidden even in Levi's presence, according to Tosafot, Tractate 15b. Bottom of page 45. Loshon Hara said in jest. Now this is something I'm sure you're all familiar with, as I am. And somebody then hits back, "Well, there's always, every joke has an element of truth to it." And we've probably all been tripped up on this one, and we've all been on either side of the end of this one. You're forbidden to speak Loshon Hara even in jest. The Torah prohibits derogatory statements, even if they are said without hatred and without intention of degrading the person being spoken about. Some examples: when Aryeh was rebuked for speaking Loshon Hara, he replied, "But Naphtali is a good friend of mine, and I only meant it as a joke." The fact that someone is only joking is not a valid excuse for speaking Loshon Hara. One Purim, a group of Radnir Yeshiva students performed a skit in the house of the Chavetz Chaim of sacred memory. Among other things, they jokingly alluded to an episode that had caused a large controversy in the yeshiva circles, so they alluded to it in the course of their performance. Immediately, the Chavetz Chaim admonished them, saying, "Even on Purim, one must refrain from Loshon Hara." So, as they progressed in their presentation, the Chavetz Chaim stood up and told them, even on Purim, one must refrain from Loshon Hara. Number 6, Loshon Hara without mentioning names. It is not necessary to explicitly mention someone's name for a statement to be considered Loshon Hara. If the listener will be able to deduce the identity of the person you are referring to, you are guilty of speaking Loshon Hara. Beware of imitating the subject's voice or gestures, as this may also convey his identity. In general, it is best to refrain completely from making any disparaging remarks, even though you might think that the subject of your remark is unknown to your listeners, or that you have given them insufficient evidence by which to deduce his identity. You might be wrong. An example: I won't mention any names, but it rhymes with bold. Of course, only one person we know is capable of doing that. So a few sort of examples of the preface statements or the subsequent statements that you hear when a person relates a situation to another person or a group of people. And somebody can quite easily say, "Listen, I don't want to mention any names, but somebody left out the cleaning equipment," and you point to the guy. You haven't. I'm not mentioning any names, but my finger's done that. Or I'm not going to say who it is, but his last name starts with P, and there's only one other person in the room whose last name starts with P. We have to be very careful. We don't play around with it. Don't try and find a loophole. You're playing with your life. So why would you wouldn't play Russian roulette with a gun. So don't play Russian roulette with Loshon Hara, with the laws of Shemrat HaLashon. Don't do it. Just go, okay. And that's why, if you start taking a lot of this to heart, you'll be cutting down your speaking probably by about 50%. And you'll be curtailing and economizing your speech when you go out. If you're a male, you'll maybe be being continuing or increasing in your politeness, I would hope, toward dealing with somebody at a point of transaction, a cashier or someone of the opposite sex, and you will make sure that you economize your words. You will speak economically, and you won't, make any kind of additional comments that may trigger a conversation, and certainly not go out of your way to compliment the person on their hair or their fingernails or anything like that. Because even though you think you're being nice, it's the subtle movements and the prods of the Yetzer Hara to get maybe some sort of opening or conversation going, and who knows where that could lead. And so, that's, you wouldn't say it if your wife was sitting next to you. You wouldn't compliment a lady at a cashier. Some would say, yes, I would. It's like, well, okay. That really, so there's somebody out there, I'm sure, that's belligerent enough to say, I'd say that in front of my wife. Well, you shouldn't, man. You just shouldn't. Should be complimenting your wife. She should be on your radar all the time, even 8 years into the marriage, even 10 years into the marriage. And, Okay, let's go on to the next one. Number 7, causing damage without saying anything derogatory. Any statement, even if not derogatory, that might ultimately cause financial loss, physical pain, mental anguish, or any damage is Loshon Hara. Rav Yehuda, Rav Yossi, and Rav Shimon Bar Yoki were discussing the Roman occupation of Eretz Israel. Rav Yehuda praised the Romans for their numerous accomplishments which had benefited the Jewish inhabitants. Rav Yossi remained silent. Rav Shimon Bar Yoki argued that the Romans' intentions were not humanitarian. they were motivated by self-interest. Yehuda ben Gurion was present during the discussion and innocently repeated that he had heard what he had heard to his family. As a result of Yehuda ben Gurion's lack of discretion, the Romans eventually found out about the discussion and sentenced Rav Shimon bar Yochai to death. Wow! So you got to be very careful. I wonder if this was the incident, and put in the comments if you know. I wonder if that's the incident that drove Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai into the cave. It'd be interesting for 12 years or 13 years or whatever it was with his son. Rav Shimon was forced to go into hiding in order to save himself. I guess that is it. Yeah, wow. Shabbos, Tractate Shabbos 33b. And I've finished Tractate Shabbos too. I might go back and have a look at that. I don't remember reading that. Cool. Note that Yehuda ben Gurion was not warned to keep the conversation a secret, and he did not intend to cause Rav Shimon any harm. He merely repeated the conversation to his family. Nevertheless, since it was evident that if the Romans would find out about Rav Shimon bar Yochai, about what Rav Shimon ben Yochai said, they would deal with him harshly. It is forbidden for Rabbi Yehuda ben Gurion to repeat the conversation. During the Roman occupation, you just had to be very careful. There's a lot of informing going on. We see that other times in history, and we saw it as recently as the Holocaust. A lot of informing going on, even among family members, and sometimes there wasn't even any malice intended. 8. Concealed Loshon Hara is if you conceal a derogatory statement and do not overtly say anything harmful or derogatory, but intentional harm will nevertheless result. You have spoken Loshon Hara. Maybe you just throw it out there to throw some mud to see if any of it will stick, or maybe it's a 50-50 and I'll give that a shot. No, you can't. You can't do that. The government needed to construct a large bridge, had limited funds for the project. In order to save the money, it divided the Jews of the city into 6 groups. Every day, a different group had to work on the bridge without compensation for their labor. One morning, now this is obviously during the Holocaust, during the war years. This is forced labor, obviously, of some degree. One morning, Mr. Spinchy decided that he would spend his time learning Torah and didn't come to work. Some fellow laborers who were jealous and devised a plan. Hey there, fellow, what did you bring for lunch today? A worker called out. Spinach, replied his friend. When the foreman heard the word spinach, it reminded him that Mr. Spinchy had not come to work. Immediately, he sent a police officer to fetch Mr. Spinchy based on Yerushalmi Pa'eh 1:1. So they devised a plan to, within earshot of the foreman, to mention something that would rhyme with the last name of the gentleman and get them to be triggered and think, hang on, where's this Spinchy bloke? And so they might as well have gone up and said, hey, Mr. Spinchy isn't here today. You better go and see where he is. In effect, it's probably worse by concealing it like that and go to the trouble of trying to, and then if they go, we didn't know, then now you're lying. You said it so that will, you might as well have just gone up and said to the foreman, oh, by the way, this guy's not here. Because you've gone to such cloak and dagger about it and constructed it and come up with this nice little bit of dialogue, it makes it a heck of a lot worse. Number 9, a derogatory statement that will not cause damage. If you say something derogatory about another person, you are guilty of speaking Loshon Hara, even if the person does not suffer any consequent loss or damage. An example of this is a case where the listener refused to believe the derogatory statement that you told him. Good for him. And he shouldn't. We should give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Even if you realize beforehand that no damage will result from your Loshon Hara, it is still prohibited. The Torah forbids the mentioning of derogatory information, whether or not it causes harm. Hannah spoke against the teacher and claimed, my teacher has a lifetime contract. Regardless of what I say, she won't lose a job. This is not a valid justification. Hannah spoke against the teacher and claimed... No, I just read that. Sorry. 19. Giving people the benefit of the doubt. If all feasible if at all feasible, you should give people the benefit of the doubt. If you relate an incident not giving the benefit of the doubt, in circumstances which obligate you to do so, you would be guilty of speaking Loshon Hara and of failing to perform the commandment of betzadek tishpot amesecha, which means judge your neighbor with righteousness. It's always good to have that attitude towards other people, particularly if there's people that sort of get on your nerves, and just give them the benefit of the doubt and give them all the patience in the world, because you're acting in a way that has a forgiving attitude and forgiving nature, and that's going to cultivate more of this ability to genuinely forgive other people. And generally, when people get thrown into the frightening and terrifying hands of the Almighty at the time of judgment or preliminary judgment or any time of accounting, it's a good thing to have in your defense. In your defense is this attitude of forgiveness of people that have even wronged you, and maybe even severely wronged you in some way. Maybe they've committed some sort of wronging against your property, against your honor, against your body, or anything. Maybe it's a family member or something like that. But obviously, if the family member's in danger, you've got to go to their defense. You just don't remain silent and go, "Oh, I'm not going to do anything." If it's your children at school, you need to, even if it means you've got to pull them out and put them into another school, or go in there and start finding out what's going on, because you don't want other people to suffer, because other people may not have your level of forgiveness and giving other people the benefit of the doubt. It's not about being a pushover. You don't want to get yourself in a state where, I forgive everybody, so therefore you're a pushover. No, you still stand your ground, and you can still be passionate and be zealous for things, for the emet. Regarding a pious, Elohim-fearing person, we are always obligated to give a pious Elohim-fearing person the benefit of the doubt. That is true not only when the chances of zechut, favorable judgment, and chov, and unfavorable judgment seem equal, but even when it appears most likely that his action was improper. So if it's a very pious person, a person who fears Hashem, who wouldn't put a foot wrong to upset Hashem in private and in public, they're very, very ethical, even when no one's watching, and they just have a reputation that's just based on hard yards, and they've done something that looks pretty bad. You've got to give them the benefit of the doubt, at least initially. Mr. Kras, a very pious man, was told man has told you that he presently cannot afford to return money he owes you, but you notice that he has a large amount of cash in his wallet. You are obligated to assume that the money you see is either not his own, or if it is his own, that he needs it for an important purpose that is more important than paying you back. To tell others, Mr. Kraus wasn't, yes, pronounced Kraus, sorry. Mr. Kraus doesn't repay his debts, even though he has the money to do so, would be a violation of Batzadek Tishpot Hamesecha. You'd also be guilty of speaking Loshon Hara. So there's two felonies there, two sins there. Rabbi Piloni honored a certain person, in your opinion, non-deservedly. It is possible that Rabbi Piloni felt the man was deserving of honor, since he had virtues that are not known to many people. If you assume that Rabbi Poloni was motivated by selfish motives, he wanted honor from this man in return, and you tell others that Rabbi Poloni seeks honor, you are guilty of not giving him the benefit of the doubt and of speaking Loshon Hara. He may very well be speaking that way to get honor for himself, but who are we to make that assumption? Even when all sort of roads lead to Rome, you connect the dots and you go, yeah, it looks pretty obvious. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to sort of try and get it off our chest and have a bit of a vent about it and sound it out with somebody else. It doesn't. We don't need to do that. I mean, why are we doing that? Like, okay, that's what it looks like. It's probably not. Okay, let's just pretend we saw nothing. Maybe if it happens a third time, okay, but is it really going to affect you? Maybe you can take Rabbi Poloni aside and say, Rabbi, have you got a fixation with honor? Something like that. But do it in private, and do it with humility if you can. Be an average mitzvah observer. The rules concerning giving the benefit of the doubt to an average person is as follows. Number one, if he if the probability of zechut and kov seem equal, we are obligated to give the person the benefit of the doubt. 2, if the possibility of kov seems more likely than the possibility of zechut, it is proper to leave the matter undecided in your mind. And it's quite fine for you to do that. Go, well, I don't really know. I'm not sure either way. You know, you're not sure? No, I'm not sure. You know, you don't have to have a defined answer for anything. Like, it's the same with theology. Like, some of the theology doesn't even affect our walk. It's just intellectual belief in what you think something is. It just doesn't. You don't have to. You know, you've found that there's good arguments for both sides. Who says that you have to go, oh, I'm going to fall on the sword for one or the other? No, you don't. You say, I don't know. I'm not really sure about that. As long as it's nothing that, you know, you're required, it's going to cause any type of observance to be skewed. You know, there's this fixation as, oh, do you believe in the Trinity or not the Trinity? And like, you know, it's like, well, you know, I don't. But, you know, there are sort of 3 kind of manifestations. And the Zohar seems to mention some, but you know what I mean? But according to the Christian interpretation, no, but you know what I mean? Like, I mean, that's probably a bad example because I kind of have a feeling towards that it goes one way or the other, but I can't really think of something that I'm not decided on. But I know there's things that I'm just really not decided on. And so you can even write about those subjects because you can write all the arguments for and arguments against, and you can let the reader decide. So it's not like you can't even talk about the subjects, even write a paper on them. You can. In fact, I would say that, you know, that'd probably be one of the best ways for a person to become acquainted with the subject, because they're reading the subject by a person who doesn't really know which is the right answer, so they just present all the arguments for and against. You know, you can argue that's probably a good way to be introduced to a subject. As long as it's a subject that doesn't, you know, pervert your observance. Number 3, even when the side of Kov appears more likely, it is meritorious for you to give the person the benefit of the doubt. Keep in mind what our sages have said. Whoever gives others the benefit of the doubt, Hashem Yisbarach will deal likewise with him according to Tractate Shabbos 127b. So there you go. So if you give other people the benefit of the doubt, Hashem will give you the benefit of the doubt. If you have mercy on other people, then Hashem will show you mercy. If you're not, you're ruthless, you're vengeful, what do you think is going to happen to you? Measure for measure. Midah kineged midah. Measure for measure. David, an average mitzvah observer, has told you that he cannot presently repay his debts. Since you can't discern any indications to the contrary, you're obligated to assume that he is telling you the truth. If you see that David has money, and his excuse for not paying does not seem plausible to you, the matter should remain undecided in your mind. It is commendable in such an instance to think that David is truly not able to pay on time. It's commendable to think that. Think about that. Remember that. Why they've got money, otherwise why can they go on that holiday? No, just that they can't pay you. I don't know, maybe somebody shouted them the holiday. Maybe they've got some help. Maybe they booked a holiday years before that they borrowed the money from you, and they've finally paid it off, and now they're going on it, and they've saved for the holiday, but they don't have money set aside to be able to pay you back yet. So just give them a break. The Talmud in Shabbos 127b relates an incident from which we can gain some insight into the extent of our obligation to grant the benefit of the doubt. A man from Upper Galil hired someone out excuse me, to someone in South Eretz Israel for 3 years. Before Yom Kippur, he said to his employer, "Give me my wages so I can go home and feed my wife and children." "I have no money," was the employer's reply. Then give me fruit," suggested the man. "I have none," answered the employer. "Give me property, I don't have any. Give me livestock, I don't have any. Give me pillows and blankets, I don't have any." The man slung his belongings over his shoulder, and he went home bitterly disappointed. After Sukkot, the employer brought the wages plus 3 donkeys loaded with food, drinks and delicacies to the home of the employee. Okay, so finally the employees turned up, and not only has he brought his wages, he's brought all this additional stuff. After they had eaten and the salary was paid, the employer asked, "When you asked me for money and I said that I didn't have, what did you suspect?" Because this employer is obviously impressed with this guy who'd worked for him for how many years? 3 years, and was meant to be getting 3 years worth of wages, if I've read that right. I hope I've read that right. So that's like a lot of money, especially in this day and age. And he's going, I can't at the moment. And so he's going home with nothing, right? So so now the employer's turned up with all this stuff and compensation, and he's just curious. It's like, how did you not explode? I was expecting you to pull a knife on me and steal from me, but you were just fine. And then he answers, okay? So this is the first thing. What did you suspect? I thought that you might have spent your money on a bargain that had just been presented, that had just then presented itself. When I told you that I had no livestock, what was your thought? I thought that you might have lent them to others. And when I said I didn't have any property, maybe it was leased to others. And when I said that I didn't have any fruit, perhaps you hadn't separated Marseille tithes yet. What did you think when I said that I didn't have any pillows or blankets? I thought that you might have dedicated all of your possessions to the Beit HaMikdash. I make an oath that is exactly what happened. Just as you have judged me favorably, so too should Elohim judge you favorably as well. So this guy, after 3 years of working, asking for his salary, asking to be paid. I mean, the fact that you have to even go up and ask, some people are already at boiling point. And then he's, by way of process, so, okay, can I have some blankets? Can I have livestock? Can I have land? No. And so, a normal person would go, well, obviously that you had a problem with my work for the last 3 years. Why didn't you confront me with it? Now this is robbery. You've taken 3 years of my, you could go down all this path. But he's just gone to such the nth degree and gone, well, maybe he's leased the property. Maybe he's given everything that he owns over to the Beit HaMikdash, and maybe he's scheduled to get some more money again soon, but it just doesn't have it now. And so, it's just crazy. But please bear in mind, I'm not condoning anybody to become naive. It's just not about being naive. You may have your suspicions, but that doesn't mean you have to air them. That doesn't mean you have to act on them or talk about other people about what you suspect, or go out on a limb and think, I think da-da-da-da. And why don't you do the opposite to that and say something that I think, maybe he's a great Zadik or something like that. But we always have a tendency to think the worst. And it's very hard to fight that natural tendency, to overcome it. And this is what the Torah is all about. Learning the Torah is all about. It's about giving you the tools to be able to actually go against your natural instincts and prepare yourself in this side of the veil, in this vestibule, for all the treasures that you can partake of in the Olam Haba potentially. Thank you so much for joining me. I love this subject. Absolutely love looking at stuff pertaining to Shimurat HaLashon. I don't know why legions of people aren't doing it in the religious world, particularly in the Jewish world or in the Christian world, in the Messianic world, and all the faiths who purport to follow the Bible. I don't know why it's not front and center. It's learning to have one of the attributes that Yeshua had, and that was to be careful of what goes into your mouth. Sure, try and keep kosher the best you can, but be even more careful as to what comes out of it. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye for now. Until next time, have a great Pesach. Hag Sameach.